Next here, the CDC's eviction moratorium has expired. That was the rule passed down by our overlords at the CDC, saying that landlords are not allowed to evict people who don't pay their rent. Now, how in the hell does the CDC have the authority to make a policy? How do they have the authority to make any policy, let alone a housing policy? Well, nobody ever quite explained that. The CDC never explained where they get this authority from, but they found it. Or rather, they just claimed it. That's what tyrants do. They say, oh, what do you mean authority? I have the authority because I'm doing it. That's why I have it. And so that was the policy that had been in place for months now, and then it expired. Congress didn't extend it, and now the socialist wing of the Democrat Party, which is otherwise known as the entire Democrat Party, is playing the blame game. First, here's AOC a few nights ago, in the middle of the night, saying that she was marching to the Capitol to demand that the moratorium be extended. This I think is pretty frightening. This is kind of an insurrection that you might say, that she conducted on her own. Let's watch this.
Hello from Washington. It is about 11:24 right now, and I am walking to the Capitol because Congress is about to allow the National Eviction Moratorium to expire at midnight tonight. And they're forcing the moratorium to expire before the emergency rental assistance money has gotten out to renters and mom and pop landlords. And so I'm heading out over there because Sister Cori Bush has called for us to come out there and call on Congress to bring their butts back so that we can vote to extend the moratorium. And it's not just me, and it's not just Representative Bush, but we've done a call, and lots of everyday people are starting to show up on the Capitol steps demanding that we extend the eviction moratorium, because the alternative is to allow almost 11 million people to be at risk of eviction starting midnight tonight.
Look at that. That is that's terrible. Storming the Capitol, an insurrection. It's worse than 9/11, honestly. But it's the eviction moratorium. She's saying it's coming to an end. People are going to be evicted. It's going to be a crisis across the country. And that might actually happen, where lots of people lose their housing because they've been told for the last many months that they don't have to pay their rent. And that was never going to last forever. It couldn't last forever. And so by giving people, waving your magic wand and giving millions of people the right, quote unquote, to not pay their rent, you have set them up for this, AOC. You've set them up for what's about to happen. But we should say, she was on CNN later after storming the Capitol and conducting this insurrection. The insurrectionist was on CNN talking about this, and she doesn't blame the Republican Party. She actually blames the Democrats. Let's watch that.
Democrats control the House. You guys control the Senate. You guys control the White House. Nothing aggressive was done by leadership until just a couple days ago. Who's to blame here?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues here. First of all, you are absolutely correct in that the House and House leadership had the opportunity to vote to extend the moratorium. And there were many, and there was frankly a handful of conservative Democrats in the House that threatened to get on planes rather than hold this vote. And we have to really just call a spade a spade. We cannot, in good faith, blame the Republican Party when House Democrats have a majority. Now, there is something to be said for the fact that this court order came down on the White House a month ago, and the White House waited until the day before the House adjourned to release a statement asking on Congress to extend the moratorium.
Conservative Democrats. That's the funniest thing I've heard in several days. A handful of conservative Democrats. Who are those exactly? It's every single Democrat that you will talk to publicly will say, for example, that men can get pregnant. So that's conservative now. Conservative Democrats. But this is a perfect example of the faux compassion that you get from the left, and even a lot of people on the right who defend these sorts of policies. An eviction moratorium. If we could put to the side the fact that the CDC does not have the authority to issue such a proclamation in the first place, And it's kind of, that's the law. Okay, the Constitution, it's sort of hard to put that to the side. It's really important, I would say, if we want to be a civilized society under any kind of rule of law, then you can't really put the law to the side. But if we were to do that and just talk about this thing on the merits, this is horrific, counterproductive, stupid, morally deranged, immoral, that you are telling people that they are required to keep people in their homes, on their property, who are not paying for the right to be there. That's what the government declared. If you're a landlord, and there's someone on your property, in your home, who is refusing to pay you, refusing to compensate you at all, you must continue to pay for them to live there. You got to pay their bills. You're paying the mortgage. You have to pay their rent for them and allow them to stay on your property. That, you know what that is? That's slavery. That's forced labor. You're being forced by the government to pay someone else's rent for them on your property. It's unthinkable. And yet millions of idiots will defend it on the basis of compassion. Compassion for who exactly? What about the person who owns the house? Owns the property? What about them? You're putting them underwater because a big part of their financial plan here is that, they've got to pay the mortgage on this property. And so to help them pay the mortgage, then that's why the renters have to pay. It's not, just to be clear, it's not because they're mean. It's not because they're mean that they're making you pay the rent. It's because they're providing you with something, with a service, and you have to pay in exchange, but also they need to pay. Very often they have bills they have to pay the mortgage on this property. And if you don't chip in, then now they got to pay their own mortgage for their home, plus this and however many other properties they own. So you are putting them in a financial crisis by not fulfilling your own obligations. And so, it's compassionate if we pretend that the landlords don't exist, that they're not really people. Speaking of forced labor and slavery, if we just pretend that they don't count as people, then it's perfectly compassionate. And again, there are mean landlords out there. I haven't rented in a long time, but with my experience with landlords, I had some good experiences and some bad experiences. So there are mean landlords out there. There are bad landlords, sure. But it's still their property. They own it. And you don't have a right to be there if you're not paying for it. Imagine thinking that someone else, some stranger, you are entitled to stay on their property without compensating them. You're entitled to it. Imagine walking into someone else's house, a stranger, you don't know them, and saying, I'm entitled to be here. No, you can't kick me out. Because that's what you're doing. You're squatting. You're a squatter now, and you are trying to defend your right to squat on this property without paying. It really is infuriating. And just so you know, there are mean landlords out there. There are bad landlords. But not every landlord is some sort of fat cat, in his office, sitting on his leather chair, stroking his white cat, smoking a cigar, laughing maniacally about all the poor people he's about to evict from his property. Okay, that's not the case. That's not how all landlords are. In fact, most of them aren't. A lot of landlords, they're just normal people. You want to know a situation that happens a lot, and this is how a lot of single-family homes that are for rent. You could have just a normal family that moves from a house, and let's say they're not able to sell it, or they decide they don't want to sell it, and they move into a different house, and they rent out the house they just moved out of. These are just normal middle-class families. Yeah, there are plenty of normal middle-class families, middle-class people who are landlords. But they don't count. And now you're saying, you got to pay 2 mortgages now. And if you're destitute because of it, that's your problem. And also, I think it this has some bearing on this thing, that employers across the country are begging for employees. Okay, there is not a crisis of jobs not being available. Employers are begging for people to come work for them. You can get a signing bonus at McDonald's now. So who exactly are these millions of renters who simply cannot pay their rent at all, don't have the ability, can't get a job, can't do anything, while you've got employers begging, saying, please come work for us. We'll do anything. But I know you have the right to say, no, I don't want the job, but I'm just going to stay here. And I'm not going to pay for anything, and you have to pay for me to stay here in your house. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Matt Walsh Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.